The penultimate execution to be carried out in Britain's history took place in 1963. The case is curious not just because two men were simultaneously hanged for the crime, but the victim had also died twice. For decades, William Garfield Rowe had been dead to the outside world of his own volition, but the recluse only died officially when he opened the door to Dennis Whitty and Russell Pascoe. William Rowe was not the most sociable person. In fact, he was so reclusive, living alone in his farmhouse in Constantine, Cornwall, after his mother and brother had died, that many villagers thought the man had lost his life during the First World War. In truth, in 1917, 18-year-old William was conscripted into the army, but he returned home within a week without the military's permission. William's parents, who lived on Venton Vedna Farm in Porthleven, were staunch pacifists. They briefly welcomed him back before giving him £50 and sending him into hiding. Eventually, the military caught up with William and sent him to a detention centre on the Isle of Wight, from where he escaped. For the rest of the war, William remained strictly out of sight before returning to his family's farm. Still fearing punishment for deserting the army and his escape from the Isle of Wight, it was decided that William would continue to keep an extremely low profile. Those in the village that asked about his whereabouts were told that he had died in the war. William would stay in an upstairs room during the daytime and come out at sunset to work on the farm and earn his keep. When World War II broke out, the family feared that civil servants checking records may find out the truth, so they did not register William for clothing coupons or rations. Handily, the farm provided enough food for them to see out the war without much issue. When William's father passed away in 1949, his mother and brother Stanley moved to Constantine. During the journey, William hid amongst a pile of sacks in a hay cart. His mother died in 1954 and his brother Stanley in 1956, leaving William alone. He could have had a big problem on his hands, but handily for him and many others, Queen Elizabeth II had granted an amnesty for all those who had deserted during both world wars at the start of her reign. This allowed William to return from his first death. He did so by marching to the local police station and letting them know he was still very much alive. But after 39 years of living such a reclusive life, it was hard for him to change his ways. As the Packet reported, he carried on quietly at the isolated farmhouse, shopping once a week, visiting market now and again, but always happy to return to his cattle, pigs and cats at Nanjaro. Not everybody knew about William. However, some were aware that he was indeed still alive and well at the age of 64 in 1963. For some time, there had been a local rumour circulating that William had a large sum of money concealed on the premises of the Nanjaro farm. His home had been burglarised in 1960, and the thieves took £200 along with other items. 23-year-old Russell Pascoe and 22-year-old Dennis Whitty had also heard about this supposed hidden fortune on the old man's farm. The two men were living with three young women in a caravan at Kenwyn Caravan Park on the outskirts of Truro, Cornwall. Dennis had a job at Truro Gasworks, while Russell had previously worked as a labourer at Nanjaro Farm for 8 months, so he knew William Rowe and his farmhouse. And so, on the night of Wednesday, August the 14th, 1963, Dennis and Russell travelled to Nanjaro Farm on Russell's motorcycle. Pascoe had asked one of the girls, Norma Booker, for a pair of her stockings as the pair were going to do a job. The duo were wearing dark clothing and had also brought with them a starting pistol, a knife and an iron bar. It was around 11 p.m. when Dennis and Russell knocked on William's door. Despite the size of the property, William spent most of his time in one of the downstairs rooms, so while he may have been surprised to receive visitors at such a late hour, he soon answered. Russell told his former employer that Dennis was a pilot. He was wearing jeans and a double-breasted blazer with a silver button to look like one, and explained they had crashed a helicopter nearby and needed to use a phone. It is unclear if William believed the story or ever had time to answer, as he was quickly knocked to the ground with the iron bar. However, the two men did not stop there. They continued the brutal attack using both the bar and the knife, leaving William dead on the doorway with at least 6 wounds to his head, a fractured skull, broken jaw, a severed finger, and 5 chest wounds, one of them to the heart. After brutally slaughtering the farmer, Dennis and Russell raided the house in search of the supposed hidden fortune, but in the end, all they found was £4 in a piano and some watches. They split the measly blood money and returned to their caravan at Truro. According to the young women they lived with, Dennis was grinning all over his face, while Russell was cleaning blood from his face. William's body was discovered the following morning by a Truro cattle dealer who had come to pick up 2 cows. By that evening, his death was already reported in a newspaper. Farmer found battered to death, Scotland Yard detectives called in. Russell's girlfriend saw the news and confronted Dennis, asking, "You went to Constantine. Did you do this?" Dennis simply replied, "Yes, I did." The woman would later say that even though she knew what her boyfriend and Dennis had done, she could not tell anybody, as they had threatened to kill all the girls if they came forward. The police had acted quickly and set up roadblocks around the area in order to stop and question people, and luckily, on August the 16th, a policeman stopped Russell as he was riding his motorcycle and asked him to go for routine questioning at the murder headquarters. During the interview, Russell claimed he had been in their caravan in Truro around the time of the murder. He did, however, admit he knew William Rowe and had worked for him previously. After that comment, the police realised that Russell had actually been a labourer at Nanjara Farm around the time of the burglary back in 1960. Dennis was then brought in for questioning, and from that moment, perhaps realising there was no way out of the situation, the two men began to blame each other, most likely knowing very well what they were facing. As Dennis said, "We're both over 21, so I suppose we can hang." Dennis's story was that Russell had beaten William with the iron bar and forced his accomplice to stab him, saying, "Pascoe made me stick him." In turn, Russell admitted he had knocked William out with the iron bar, but said it had been Dennis who instigated the attack and went mad with the knife. Russell also said that Dennis had taken the iron bar from him at some point and struck William with it again and again. Later, in court, Russell also said he never wanted to go to the farmhouse as he had seen the lights were on and William was at home. "I said to Whitty that if Mr. Rowe was in, it would be best to leave it go. We saw a light in the farmhouse and I said again it would be best to leave it go." A rather curious comment, as William Rowe rarely left his house, and Russell had worked on his farm before. He very well knew the old man would be at home. Dennis and Russell could have also simply subdued William, tied him and taken whatever they were after that night before leaving. They did not have to beat him to death. During the trial that began on October the 29th at Bodmin Assizes, the two men kept blaming each other, Russell saying that Dennis urged him to hit William again, and in turn Dennis asked his accomplice, "What did you have to do that to the old chap for?" Dennis's lawyer, Mr. Norman Skelhorn QC, claimed his client had been acting under Russell's influence and that his mental health issues had played a role in the killing. Skelhorn said that Dennis suffered from a hysterical condition and experienced blackouts. Dennis himself claimed he had seen strange and unnatural things, such as doors opening on their own and pictures changing places on walls overnight. One witness, 19-year-old David Penhaligon, whose father owned the caravan site, also testified that Dennis was prone to epileptic fits, which according to Dennis caused him to be violent. Based on the testimonies, Skellhorn said that due to his client's psychological issues, he could only be guilty of manslaughter. In the end, however, this defense did not save Dennis nor Russell. The jury debated for 4.5 hours before returning with guilty verdicts for both, and they were sentenced to death. On November 2nd, 1963, the two men were driven to separate prisons, Dennis to Winchester Prison and Russell to Hallfield Prison in Bristol. Later that month, on November 23rd, Russell and Dennis's appeals were rejected by the Court of Appeal, and the executions were set for Tuesday, December 17th, 1963. Both Home Secretary Henry Burke and the Queen herself refused clemency, and so the two men began the last 3 weeks of their lives. Back then, Robert Douglas was a young prison guard beginning a career in corrections and responsible for guarding Russell Pascoe. He would later write about his experience in his book, At Her Majesty's Pleasure. I can remember saying to Ken, Russell, another guard, I'm not looking forward to this shift. I mean, what the hell are we going to talk about all evening? I was only 24 years old myself at the time, and we had built up a good relationship with Pascoe over the previous 6 weeks, playing cards and Monopoly and listening to the radio. We went into the cell, and I asked Russell if he wanted a cup of tea. He said he didn't. So I tried to coax him. I've brought you a cream donut. I'd bought him a cream cake each day as a little treat. With that, he perked up a little and said, go on then. I'll have a tea. So we sat drinking tea for a while, none of us really saying anything, just blathering about nothing to try and fill the silences. Then Russell suddenly said, they weighed me today, so they'll know how far I'll drop. Ken and I just looked at each other. What are you meant to say to that? On December 17th, Russell Pascoe and Dennis Whitty were executed at exactly the same time at 8 a.m. Russell at Hallfield by Harry Allen and Dennis at Winchester by Robert Leslie Stewart. Both men were buried in unmarked graves within the walls of the prisons. It was later revealed that the harmless recluse William Rowe had over £3,000 hidden inside his home at the time of the attack. All his killers had come away with, however, was a measly sum and a date with the hangman's noose. Thank you for watching. Right then, take care, and I'll see you next time with another story to make you say, well, I never.